Wh40k Fluff for the uninitiated.
Episode 13, The Tyranids.
There is a cancer eaten at the Imperium. With each decade it advances deeper, leaving drained dead worlds in its wake. This horror, this abomination, has thought and purpose that functions on an unimaginable galactic scale. And all we can do is try to stop the swarms of bioengineered monsters it unleashes upon us almost by instinct. We have given the horror a name to salve our fears. We call it the Tyranid race. But if it is aware of us at all, it must only know us as prey.
In 745.M41, the Imperial world Tyran, an Imperial research post at the eastern fringe of the galaxy, made first contact with a previously unknown race of Xenos. Despite being heavily fortified and designed as an impenetrable bunker protected by void shields and scores of auto and las cannons, as well as several cruisers and fighter wings in orbit, the planet was overrun in just over a week, with the Xenos race suffering minimal losses. Thanks to the efforts of Inquisitor Varnak, records of the entire incident were preserved in a data codex miles below the base proper, where a year later Inquisitor Cryptman, following a hunch about a sudden spike in new inexplicable death worlds, recovered and studied them. In honor of the planet where they were first officially acknowledged, the race was named Tyranids, and every single encounter with them has been catastrophic for the Imperium. Usually the first sign of an imminent Tyranid invasion is a phenomenon known as the Shadow in the Warp, which reveals itself as nightmares in non-psychers, and intense horror including physical manifestations in psychers, and the ability to warp travel in the affected area or send astropathic messages.
They are coming! I feel them scratching inside my mind. Scratching, screaming, running, so many voices. They are coming for us. Flesh, body, and soul.
This shadow in the warp is a result of the psychic network linking all Tyranid organisms together into a hive mind, which effectively means that among Tyranids there are no individuals. The entire race is in essence a single macro-consciousness, a brain-like network made up of all Tyranid creatures, held together by synapse creatures and controlled by hive tyrants and their female counterparts, the Norn Queens, all of which are again linked together psychically with certain restrictions as to maximum effective distance. Because of this limitation, the Tyranid race is split up into several independent hive fleets, each comprised of billions of organisms. The networked organization through the hive mind overrides the animalistic instinct-driven individuality of the creatures, but the reliance on having the hive mind's consciousness relayed by the aforementioned synapse creatures is the only exploitable weakness of the Tyranids. The death of a synapse creature will cause a localized disruption in the hive mind, depriving the smaller creatures of organization and leadership until another synapse creature can re-establish the psychic link. While controlled by the hive mind, the Tyranids move as one and know no survival instinct. If the hive mind cannot find a better strategy to overcome, for instance, a fortress wall, it has no problem throwing organisms at it until the dead pile up high enough to form a bridge. Larger species of Tyranids possess enough intellect to carry out their functions beyond the reach of the hive mind and act as advanced scouts and infiltrators.
They are bred with one aspiration, and it is an aspiration without diversion, without division. They are remorseless. They are driven and they fear nothing. Why would they? They are reborn again and again, ready to fight and die and continue on.
As a whole, the Tyranids are vaguely insectoid in appearance, frequently possessing chitinous exoskeletons, mandibles, scythe claws, and the like. Since the Norn Queens can rapidly mutate the genetic material of the creatures they spawn, it is perfectly expectable for the smaller creatures to be adapted to new deployment areas within as little as 2 or 3 generations, such as giving Hormigons plentiful fat reserves to enable them to fight longer in freezing cold climates.
The Tyranids are without a doubt the most rapidly evolving creatures in the galaxy. The Magus biologists of Mars have observed developmental DNA leaps between broods originating from different hive fleets that would take other beasts millions of years to achieve. It appears that the Tyranid Norn Queens, or primogenitor organisms, aboard the hive ships are capable of modifying their progeny in response to the environment and life forms they encounter. Newly harvested genetic codes are assimilated, the prey's defensive maneuvers are examined, and improved creatures are bioengineered to overcome that resistance. Over time, the myriad improvements to the Hive Fleet's gene pool are melded with others, strengthening the entire race.
In this manner, the Tyranids learn twofold from defeating other life forms. Once directly, because the hive mind will analyze what obstacles it faces and what needs to be done to overcome them, and also indirectly, by absorbing the genetic materials of reclaimed biomatter. By consuming Eldar, the Tyranids conceived the zoanthrope species, while consumption of orcs led to the evolution of biowars, and gene stealers were derived from humans. What this means is that the stronger the opposition facing the Tyranids is, the more it will strengthen the Hive Fleet in the long run, unless they can be completely annihilated, an all but impossible feat. The Imperium of Man has recently adopted a revolutionary new kind of warfare. It allows the Tyranids to invade a planet before said planet is destroyed entirely by exterminators, so the Hive Fleet will have expended biomatter and energy to conquer the planet, but will not have gained anything from their victory, and additionally lose all ground forces still on site at the time of exterminators. Each such act of denial costs the Imperium one perfectly good planet though, while the larger Hive fleets can suffer hundreds if not thousands of such failures without losing a critical amount of biomatter. In case it wasn't apparent by now, the Tyranids, collectively also named the Great Devourer, are the greatest threat to the galaxy aside from the warp itself.
We cannot live through this. Mankind cannot live through this. In a single day they have covered the surface of this planet with a flood of living blades and needle-fanged mouths. Kill 1 in 10 take its place. If they are truly without number, then our race is doomed to a violent death before every shred of our civilization is scoured away by a force more precarious than the fires of hell themselves. Death. For the machine god, death is here.
The Tyranids' one and only goal in life is to devour everything. The hive mind eternally hungers and drives its creatures ever onward through the galaxy in search of any biological matter. Using living capillary towers and devour organisms that feed and then willingly dissolve themselves in pool of organic acid and enzymes, the Hive Fleet will absorb the entire biomatter of a planet down to the bacterial level before moving on in search of new biomatter. They know no thrill of the hunt, nor the joy of victory. They simply do everything they possibly can to feed.
As I looked into its dead black eyes, I saw the terrible sentience it had in place of a soul. Behind that was the steel will of its leader. Further still, I could feel its primogenitor coldly assess me from the void, looking back from the darkest recesses of the alien's mind. I can only describe it as an immortal hunger. It is this we cannot kill.
Being as they are a race of theoretically infinite biological diversity, the Tyranids know no industry. They never create anything dead. Their spaceships are gigantic specialized Tyranid organisms housing the smaller creatures up to and including the Hive Fleet's Bio-Titans. Their aerial combat capabilities rely on airborne species, and even their weapons and ammunition are living things. These so-called biomorphs are variations to Tyranid species blueprints, whereby individual organisms may be born with ranged weaponry instead of, or in addition to, their usual claws. They could be thought of as separate organisms because the same biomorph may be applied to members of different species. A flesh borer, which houses tiny organisms that breed their offspring, flesh borer beetles, use intense muscle spasms to shoot the eggs out at high velocity, which explode upon impact, releasing the flesh borer beetles which eat through their victims. These flesh borers could be attached to a hormigaunt, a termagaunt, or even gargoyle, making them seem to be individual weapons when really they are part of the creature itself. Other examples of Tyranid weapon biomorphs are the barbed strangler, the bone sword, or flesh hooks. The same principles also apply to biomorphs that are not weaponry: acid blood, chameleonic skin, or reinforced chitin.
Torchlight shows a trail of blood leading to the back
Sometimes a Hive fleet will just happen upon an inhabited world, but more often they will be drawn to one by their most insidious scout troops, the Genestealers. Genestealer eggs are hurled through space at random. They are small, and a Hive fleet can send out hundreds and thousands of them without missing the biomatter much. When a Genestealer egg randomly lands on a world full of life, they will hatch into Puri, which conceal and defend themselves until they can infect an unwary host creature of the dominant species of the planet. The host person's epigenome will be rewritten to induce an irresistible urge to mate and instill unwavering loyalty to the Genestealer's cause. This infection is sexually transmittable and spreads to whomever this so-called contagi mates with. The creatures that are born from these contagi are called malignancy. Crude animalistic creatures of limited intelligence and use, they are considered the Genestealer cult's cannon fodder. Their only other role in Genestealer cult society is to mate, which produces the second generation Genestealer descendant, the hybrid. These look more like the original host species than the malignancy, but are still very easily distinguished and imperfect. From them are bred the true hybrids though, and this third generation of Genestealer descendant can pass as malformed members of the host species and are quite capable of intelligence. Their offspring are called primacy, which are not only almost indistinguishable from the host species, they may also randomly have the mutation of a psyker, making the affected individual a Genestealer magus. Finally, once the primacy mate, the offspring they produce is a full Genestealer Puri again, with just slight alterations to reflect the host species. These Genestealers are capable of beginning the cycle anew if brought to another planet. Over time, a Genestealer cult may grow so large as to completely take over all sentient life on the planet. The initial Genestealer that first infected a contagi meanwhile will have grown into a large psychic monstrosity called the Genestealer Primarch. All members of the Genestealer cult love their Primarch unwaveringly and will protect him at all cost. The Primarch will emit a strong psychic signal that acts as a beacon to attract any nearby Tyranid Hive fleet. Once the Hive fleet arrives and devours the planet, the entire Genestealer cult will be absorbed alongside the rest of the biomatter. Without the Imperium's knowledge, the Hive fleets are drawn to the Astronomicon, the Emperor's psychic beacon on Terra, in the same way they are drawn to Genestealer Primarchs.
Are we the last ones left alive? Are we? Someone, anyone, please. Are we? Is there anybody out there? Are we the last ones left alive?